Welcome back to the next episode of the Magic Unleashed show with your host Sana Chawla and the author of the book The Magic Within. Sometimes in life, surreal and unexpected events occur, the enormity of which changes our world overnight. In this case, literally so. What would you do then? What can anyone do under such horrific circumstances? I have here today Preeti's story during the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. Her story goes, when I was in school, I remember reading stories about the war and all that it entailed. I now have first-hand experience of what it feels like to be a victim of a military occupation. Life in Kuwait before the war was quite comfortable. We abided by the laws of the country and had easy access to public facilities. There were no restrictions in our day-to-day life. We could buy anything we wanted if it was within our means. To me, Kuwait was a dream destination. It was clean and green and an ideal place to live. But all that was to change. On August 1st, 1990, I was at home, stretched out comfortably on the sofa, watching TV when the news channel flashed the headline, Crown Prince Sheikh Saad Al Abdullah Al Salim Al Sabah in Iraq. The news bulletin went on to reveal that there was tension among Saddam Hussein Abdullah Al Majid Al Tikriti, the former president of Iraq, his assistant, and Prince Sheikh Saad. We heard later that the Sheikh had allegedly returned to Kuwait that same night. The next day, I got ready as usual for my job at the multinational company I was working, Al Ghanhim and Sons. While in the car on the way to the office, my colleagues and I remember noticing that things looked a little unusual on the roads, as if there were some sort of underlying tension. However, when our car was stopped for inspection, I thought it was a routine check by Kuwaiti army officials. However, to our complete shock, we found that they were Iraqi soldiers. A young military official pointed a rifle and yelled at us to drive faster, or else we would be shot. Fear and hysteria assailed us. We did not know what to think. In that moment of sickening silence, all I could see was darkness ahead. Was I facing imminent death? Were they going to shoot and kill us? I closed my eyes and imagined my family and agonized about their safety. I knew that the soldiers kidnapped women and assaulted them, and I fervently prayed that my family and I would not be harmed. We were more than halfway to our office when we heard gunshots. There was no place for us to make a U-turn, so we figured the safest option was to just proceed to the office. When we reached, we found the main entrance guarded by Iraqi security guards, who told us we wouldn't be allowed to leave the building once we went inside. It seemed unsafe to be on the streets, so we had no choice but to enter. We heard gunshots echoing at intervals. My fear escalated with each passing minute, especially as I was the only woman amongst them all. With every shot that was fired, I jumped out of my skin. I hugged myself tightly, holding my fiercely beating chest. All I could think of was my daughter and husband. My colleagues consoled me, and we managed to get through those difficult hours. There was nothing we could do. We just had to wait patiently. As there were no mobile phones in those days, we only had the telephone for communication. Trying to call the office management was futile, as they had declared their office closed until further notice. Life completely changed during the Iraqi invasion. It almost felt like we had become caged animals. Buildings across the city were ransacked and burnt, including the rented apartment building we were in. Once the communal water tank caught fire and the blaze spread across the entire ground floor. We had to survive on rations of food as the Iraqis had seized all the stores. There were long queues at the cooperatives just to collect our basic allowance of food. which consisted of only one packet of kubus, the pita bread, per family. Isn't Preeti's story thought-provoking? When I first heard about Preeti's predicament, I wondered what I would have done in her situation. Would I have coped as well as she did? Did it take supernatural strength of the mind for one to go through an ordeal of this kind, where the end remains unclear and all kinds of dire threats continue to face one daily? Or does nature equip us with an innate sense of survival that provides us with the psychological tools to face any circumstance? Preeti continues, "My mind and body couldn't align with the terrible situation we found ourselves. As all law and order had broken down and Saddam Hussein's undisciplined army were let loose, my family, along with thousands of other civilians, were under several threats. The invasion exposed all that is vile about human nature, and those of us who were trapped in Kuwait had become prey to these armed predators. Fear became our foremost emotion, and each day it just got worse. As Indians, we were not treated as badly as others were, but we were still fearful of the unknown. We all thought that Kuwait would soon demonetize Kuwaiti dinars and all our money would have to be converted to Iraqi dinars. Our relatives and family friends began selling their assets to raise money, hoping it would help them to travel and leave Kuwait someday. We just wanted to disappear from the terror and were prepared to go anywhere, even if it meant a refugee camp in Jordan. As luck would have it, we were not permitted to travel to Amman, Jordan. Due to the embargo, even the Iraqis were suffering in Kuwait. They too faced restrictions on basic food and milk supplies. The situation in Amman was not good either. People were treated inhumanly and forced to live in sheds in the scorching heat. The Iraqis wanted revenge and Kuwaiti nationals were being targeted. The Kuwaitis' goods used to hide in the basement of their villas and send their Indian drivers or domestic servants to buy goods on their behalf to avoid exposing themselves to the Iraqis. As we had expected, Iraqi dinars had replaced Kuwaiti dinars and we had to queue for over 8 hours from early morning till afternoon to get some money. Our friends hid their Kuwaiti currency at home, under the refrigerator, sofas, or even flower vases. After boundless patience and prayers, the Indian embassy finally came through. They organized for us to travel to Basra in a school bus, but along the way, the Iraqis hijacked our bus and stole most of our belongings. It was a brutal experience, but we managed to make it to Basra, feeling victorious. Nothing else mattered because we were blessed to be alive. From Basra, we embarked on the 7-day journey to India. The living conditions on board the ship were terrible as it was overcrowded and brimming with Indians. The smell was awful, but we managed to survive, despite the sleepless nights and mere food allowance. We finally arrived in Dubai and were flown directly to Mumbai. Thousands of our fellow countrymen had gathered there to support us. It was like a resurrection when we were finally able to breathe free again and revel in the fresh, crisp air. Relief of this plucky Indian family at last. How sobering the thought that it could have turned out otherwise. Many of us have seen the Indian movie Airlift, where the entire rescue operation was captured on screen. Preeti concludes, the Bollywood movie Airlift tells the story of how Indians managed to survive the Iraqi invasion and against all odds traveled 1,000 kilometers across the border into Amman. The movie, which released in 2016, is based on real incidents and describes the panic and turmoil that Indians faced during the Gulf War when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. The movie also depicts how 170,000 Indians were brought home by the largest and the most successful evacuation ever attempted by any country in the history of the world. Over the span of 59 days, the Indian government systematically flew over 488 Air Asia commercial flights into a war zone to evacuate and safely bring back them home. On a takeaway note, and in a view of the world situations such as the terrorist attacks or even the pandemic we face now, can we prepare ourselves in any way? Maybe it would not hurt to be aware of the local government's advice on disasters, or add to our diaries some important telephone numbers like those of your local community center or maybe the embassy. How about enrolling for a first aid course or COVID awareness? Well, there is a food for thought before signing off. I leave you on with this note, my friends. Thank you so much for listening. Until the next one again,